question. Let's kind of go with the question. What do we feel is the church's responsibility? Like as Christians and as members of the church, what do you ladies feel that the church is? What are the expectations that we have when we go to church? What's the church's responsibility?
Now, in order to have a church, you got to have bylaws. So your bylaws is going to tell you every position in that church. Whose job is what? Who's on a board member? Whose role is this? We are Indians coming to the church for the chief to feed us through the spirit. That's how I look at it. We're Indians. We're just coming. We're not coming to say that we are a pastor, we're going to usher. Unless you have a role, we're just coming to church to be fed. We want to hear the word.
I think that in the church, we're busy teaching the word, but we're not busy teaching customer service. Right. We're not busy teaching, relationship skills. So for me, if I was to be the pastor's wife, at our church, I would talk to my husband, who would be the pastor, and I would say, I want some life skill courses in place so that when we begin to minister to people, we are providing a healing, a understanding, a growth and development. Right. And if you're going to serve in the ministry, we need to set you up for success. What happens in a lot of these churches, because you've been around, because it's your granddaddy, you are appointed positions, but you're not qualified.
I think sometimes we just got to stop giving the church a hard time about things. And it goes back to what I said last week. Some people say, because I've heard well, that's why I don't go to church now, because y'all are people of faith and y'all shut down. But again, it comes to me as you're looking for an excuse, because when we don't really want to do something, we make an excuse for it. And that's just how I feel about it. Right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Where's my co-host? Well, there she is. Now let's start again. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Coffee Tea.
And what? Oh my God, I forgot. And what?
Welcome to Coffee Tea.
And what?
Christian culture. I am Tanisha R. Atkins, and I motivate people to love God, to love themselves, and to love each other. And that beauty over there is my co-host, Tan. What's up, Tan?
Hey, everybody. I am Tan Tate. I'm also known as the Hope Coach. I'm a certified master life coach. And I also I host the Tea Time with Tan podcast show. And for me, in what I do, HOPE is also an acronym for helping others prevail every day. So we're excited to have you here with what we like to call CTCC, short names. We try to cater to everybody, the millennials, they put alphabets to everything. And we're excited that you're here. And I want to go ahead and do some little housekeeping guidelines. First of all, right now, we're asking you to like, share, and tag. Like the page, tag a friend, and then share it, because I'm sure tonight's conversation is going to be something that someone needs to hear. And we are also asking you, we'd like to go over some comment guidelines. This is a non-judgmental zone. So we're not judging anybody here. We're not judging Christians. We're not judging, the unchristian. We're not judging different religions. We're here because it's time to have the conversation. So in the comments, we ask that you always be respectful and not confrontational. You can voice your opinions, but here we don't argue. It's two things we don't do, and that's go back and forth with you. So we're not going to do that. We just don't do that. So we are so excited for tonight's episode. It's part 3. Tanisha, I know I may kind of be all over the place, so you can kind of give me back on point, because it's something about probably my hair or something that kind of got me,
Yes, let's get her back focused. So as she was saying, go ahead and like and share and invite someone to join in the conversation, because we definitely want to hear your thoughts about Why have so many people stopped going to church? So we're going to dive into the conversation today. But before we do that, let's go ahead and bring up our amazing co-host for the day. Who we got today, Tan?
I'm so excited. It's actually a special occasion because we have two co-hosts. One who, it's their season, their time, and that's none other than Houston's finest, Houston's greatest, renowned. I'm just gonna go on and say it out there. The life-changing, entertainment industry, music, whatever you want to say. But I'm gonna bring her in, and then y'all gonna see why. I know how she gonna come in. Y'all, let's welcome Onyx Williams of Houston, Texas, to the Coffee, Tea, and Christian Culture.
Woo! What's up, Onyx?
Hello, guys. Hey, everyone. Welcome. And I am so glad to be here today. And it's your girl, Onyx. Onyx. Yeah. I'm so glad to be with you guys today. How y'all doing?
We're doing good.
Great. Yes, girl. And that Onyx. Can you do a 10 or Tanisha?
We're not doing no 10. That's on another show. Thank you.
I heard Miss Diana Ross.
No, today, that's the wrong show. Wrong show.
Okay.
Anyway, let's move on.
That's what I get for talking. Honey. Baby,
that's what I'll get for talking. You know what? Let me go back on focus, y'all.
I love the image. Okay, y'all look so beautiful. My queens are beautiful today.
Thank you. And without further ado, he represents the millennials. He's a social media influencer. He also think he the boss of all of us, but that's okay. That's another show. I'm just going all over the place today. But without further ado, we are excited to have back in the house, back in the co-host chair, none other than the Dr. Atkins himself.
Can you hear?
Come on, right. Good evening.
Oh, he'll be back.
Yeah, he's driving, so
yes.
So Onyx, today we're talking about the people versus the church, and let me put this out here. This is in no way any type of platform to bash the church, because that's not what this platform is about. But we're more so want to talk about, and have been talking about, why so many people have opted out of going to church. So this is part 3 of that conversation, because we ran out of time the last 2 times. And so we want to continue the conversation today, Onyx. So you ready to dive in today?
Baby, I'm ready to dive all in that thing. Let's go. Come on.
She is ready. Awesome. So before we dive in, I don't know what happened to Dr. Atkins, but we do have a special guest that we have joining us today. I don't know if he's a pastor. I'm gonna let him tell y'all who he is. But we did want to invite someone in that's kind of on the inside of the church that can maybe give us also some different perspective as to what could be going on. So we're gonna go ahead and bring him on so we can start our conversation today. So if you're just now tuning in, this is Coffee, Tea, and what?
Christian Culture.
And so we are a panel of Christian hosts that we come together to discuss topics from what would Jesus do to what's going on in the church hurt. We talk about it all in a non-judgmental fashion. So that's who we are. These are our amazing co-hosts. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and bring up our special guest. James Wilson is in the building. What's up, James?
What's going on? Thank you for having me this evening.
All right.
We are excited to have you on. Welcome to the show. We are thank you for saying yes and diving on in here with us. So with that being said, y'all know we don't have so much amount of time. So just as a recap, some of the things that people have said why people are no longer, wants to go to church. Some people said that they have been offended by the church. Some people have said, and we've had so much conversation. Some people have been hurt by the church, and we know these things exist, and they happen, and we don't want to make light of the situation, because if you are at a church and you have been hurt, I definitely understand that. You know, that's like you're in a relationship. Sometimes it takes a minute to get yourself together before you kind of move on to the next. But what's happening in some instances, James, is that some people haven't moved on yet from their hurt, and so they've opted out of like going to church altogether. So we'll just start the conversation since you're our special guest today. Can you tell us, you know, in your opinion, why you feel that so many people are kind of straying away from the idea of church?
Well, yeah. I mean, I know that there's no one situation that has happened, for many people to not come to church or not prioritize church. Well, I guess I would say, in my conversations and experiences with people and, the past, and apart from COVID, of course, I think because they don't fully prioritize value the fellowship of the saints and value the church in general, because it doesn't fit their agenda, because it doesn't fit what they are trying to achieve in life. They don't really recognize the needs for it. Therefore, they won't see how important it is for them to come,
Right. But let me ask you a question, James, before we kind of open up the floor to our amazing co-host here. Now, what do you say? Like, because I hear what you're saying. You're saying, like, for some people, church is just not an option right now because it's not a priority right now with what they have going on in their lives. But what about those people, like, that have been in the church, that were raised in the church, and that maybe something happens to them? Let's say the church hurt, and they're really feeling scared to go back. What do you think about that?
Well, I would say in that situation, and I have witnessed that as well. I know I didn't give an introduction about myself. I'm actually an elder.
I'm so rude.
It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, I'm an elder at Spirit of Life Ministry here, and I do minister the word sometimes. Whenever the opportunity presents itself. I have preached the gospel in England as well. To God be the glory. And in that situation, I would say that. For those, I guess the offense is what's keeping them, from attending, for whatever the situation or whatever the reason is, that pain, that feeling of betrayal or rejection, prevents them from valuing the church itself. They tend to let a certain mistake from the pastor or a mistake from one of the members or the leaders in the church kind of change or alter, their perception of the purpose behind the church itself, So I would say that, what keeps them would be the unforgiveness. What keeps them from coming into the church would probably be unforgiveness or bitter feelings or just those emotions that have not yet been dealt with.
That's a good answer. Onyx, go ahead and weigh in. What's your take on the situation?
I'm sorry, before Onyx weighs in, I may have missed it. I'm sorry, Onyx, before you weigh in, James, I did hear you say that you minister, so can you just tell us, are you a pastor, youth minister, just a minister, as it relates to church?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I've been licensed and ordained as an elder at Spirit of Life Ministries, and, I just do wherever I'm needed, wherever the Lord calls me to serve, I want to serve the body of Christ, because when we woke up this morning, we didn't leave our hands, behind. We didn't leave our foot at home while we went to go and, do everything that we needed to do. So in the same manner, Christ wants his body to be unified so that he can take care of the business that he wants, to be done in the earth.
Okay. Sounds good. So, Miss Onyx?
Yeah, I actually, just like, I don't know what to, I know you said you're not a pastor, James, but what do individuals, how are you addressed? Because I want to address you correctly. So how are you addressed?
Oh, as elder.
Okay, Elder James?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So, as far as when Elder James was speaking, like he said, it basically it's so many different intricate details in church hurt. Church hurt comes from different angles. It comes from a lot of times we want to look at the congregation. Okay, we also have to recognize the pastors, the elders. They're also dealing with that as well. So my thing is, it's very important that everyone, the congregation, from the congregation to the leaders, to the disciples, to the pastors, everyone, it's very important that you have effective communication. Because if you don't have effective communication, okay, then there could be a lot that falls between that. Okay. And there is a lot. Sometimes we get caught up. There, you know what? There are a lot of selfish people. Period. And we sometimes try to we want to victim blame. We want to continue to play victim. But when I say that you have to have effective communication, this is where things, just like, let's just say, take an example. If Elder James had someone and he had to do a session, someone that came in to him for counseling. My thing is right now, because there's so much hurt going on, and not just because of COVID. Okay, COVID basically has made things worse, because this is where you tend to find, okay, so was this church really for me? So we need to get to the fact of saying, okay, why were they not there? But we need to it's almost like life coaching. Like, we need to have these conversations. It's basically where we can go and share things. These, when even when we're in church, I know we're talking about God and what have you, but we also need to go before the church. Even when we are worshiping on Sundays, there needs to be even messages about experiences, because that's what it's all about. How can we convey things, and we can get people to talk about things on an everyday basis, while still getting spiritually fed from our pastors and from our church?
That's a good point, Onyx. And Ted actually shared a little bit of that on one of our first episodes when we started out this conversation. Ted had a good point about how she feels like inside of the church there need to be like some type of people skills. What you call it, Ted? We can't hear you.
I'm muting my mic to try to diffuse some of the feedback. But I call it customer service training, life skills training, because some people have never been in positions where they had to deal with other individuals, and it's needed, because I will share. I had a horrible customer service experience the first time I went to the Woman Thou Loose conference in Atlanta, and I was like, these are the people in the church. But then God began to deal with me. He like, they still people. Everybody hasn't been trained in the way that they should be. Just because somebody saved don't mean they know how to handle people or relationships. So I just think that for me, that would be important. And the greatest point that I think I made out of all of that is that even in the corporate world, whenever you got hired, it used to be called personnel, because it was just personal about you and the company. But then they changed it to human resources, because they realized they needed to be a resource, not only for the employee, but in some facet for their families as well. So I just think that, as Onyx was talking about, it's just not about the word, but how do you begin to live and execute and deliver what you're being taught.
Right. And I want to touch base. Oh, I'm sorry. Was somebody saying something? Oh, I thought somebody was saying something. I wanted to kind of bring out something that James said when he first kind of opened up, because I kind of feel like this too. I think that some people have really gotten away from the necessity of the church. for whatever reason. For some people, it may just not really fit in your schedule. For some people, I think too that there's been a generation shift. Like when we were younger, like our parents took us to church all the time, and that's something that I don't see a lot of times these days. I don't know if it's because of the time we're living in, or I honestly feel like it's a lot of distractions, like social media, and because social media can be a distraction. Let's just keep it real. And I think sometimes the outside partying or the one to do this. I think if that's your thing, that's not a judgment saying don't do those things. But I think some people too are like saying, I'm tired, I'm sleepy. But just kind of, if you go back and kind of read the scripture, and it talks about the first churches were formed. And I like to go back to the beginning because you have to, sometimes when you're dissecting something, to go back to the beginning, and when the churches were first formed, like after Jesus went up into the clouds, and then the community of believers started coming together. And the Bible talks about how they used to come together and meet each other's needs. And I think I've heard some people say that they don't see that in church anymore. They feel like when you come to church, it's so much that's missing. And honestly, I think that's the problem. People are not, they feel like they're coming to church and leaving void. What do you think about that, Dr. Atkins?
Well, I think everybody had a valuable point, but when you talk to certain people, it's about, you got to get to the bottom of it. Like a lot of these preachers are pimping Jesus. You know what I mean? When I say pimping Jesus, it's like, oh, I can't bury your grandma because she ain't paid her tithes. And I just had a friend tell me that. I'm like, what? So you got to take out all of that. That goes along with church hurt. It goes along with church hurt.
I agree with that.
And me personally,
I agree with that.
I do too. I'm just saying, me personally, people need to be informed and educated. Because when you talk about the church, who make up the church? It's people. I keep saying that this should be the people versus the people, because people make up the body of Christ. People make up the church. So who are we identifying as the church? The church is just not the pastor or the leaders, and they are still people, and there is no perfect people. I know this because I came from a place of leadership in the workplace. Managers, vice presidents, and whatever, they treat people wrong all the time. I happen to have been one of those type of leaders. My manager would say, we need to terminate this person. And I'm like, no, because we haven't done everything we needed to do. So if that means you got to terminate me, then fine, because I got to go home and sleep tonight. I'm not going in here and process a termination. The point I'm trying to make is that you get wronged at your jobs all the time. Same people been at the same job 30, 40, 50 years saying, they keep doing me wrong. So we don't leave our jobs. Sometimes we don't leave our marriages. We don't leave our relationships. We don't leave, a lot of things. We don't leave our sports teams because, I'm a native Houstonian and I'm Texans, I'm Oilers, everybody, talking football. But we go right there. We pay that money to get that ticket, but we want to say the pastor pimping the church, but it's okay for the NFL to pimp us. So that's kind of I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying we're having a conversation. It's not personal for anybody on the panel, but just things that people need to begin to talk about. There's going to always be a reason to say something happened at the church, but something happened at that nightclub. Your friend got killed at that nightclub, but you're going to go right back to that club and party again. It goes back to what Elder Wilson says. What do we put value on? What is a priority? And value is not something that can be calculated in dollars and cents. It's about integrity, So that's just my take on it. I just think that people leaving the church because they sick of themselves.
That's true.
I get what you're saying, but I think a lot of people go to church for they won't. You expect is a level. You expect, okay, your football team, okay, you're gonna win or you're gonna lose, but you expect the church to do right by the people. You don't expect I don't expect the pastor to touch my son or stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right. I didn't expect my brother to either, or my father, or my uncle. Those people are still humans. So we just got to be educated. That's why you got to know God for yourself. You got to be in a relationship with God for yourself so that you can get what you need, because there's always going to be something. The pastor wife, the choir director, the musician, the drummer, the usher. When Elder Wilson phone went off earlier, I was like, what the head usher at? Because, they be like, don't turn the phones on. I'm just saying, so it's going to always be somebody who slipped, because there is no perfect person. So we got to.
Mm-hmm. You remember a long time ago we had a conversation, and I told you can't be a weak-minded Christian.
I remember you saying that.
That kind of goes back to what you're saying. I agree with you saying. You got to look for yourself, but some people ain't strong-minded like that to dig and find that research for themselves.
Right. And that's the reason why you just got to make sure you find which. Tanisha, if it's okay, take us to. I think it was question number 6.
Right. And then I was just going to ask that question. Okay, Elder James, so you've been in the church for a while. And I don't know if Spirit of Life is your first ministry or your first church, but how did you know that was the church for you? Like, how do you know us as Christians if we're in the right church? Because let me be honest, sometimes we're not going to church because, again, we're leaving there empty and feeling void because you might not be in the right church. So what are some ways that you can tell if you're in the right church?
Well, I would definitely say you can tell whenever God speaks to you directly, and what I mean by that is in today's society, we have so many places, like the clubs, you have, all kind of bars, we have so many places here that minister to our flesh, that speaks to our flesh, that speaks to our emotions, that speaks to our soulish level. But the church is the one place we can come to where our spirits are spoken to, and of course, a carnal-minded person or earthly-minded person won't see the need for their spirits to be spoken to because they're living externally. Their reality is what's going on around them, right. and what benefits me, So I would say you would know you're at home when you get that inner witness that this is a place you need to be. Well, this is the place that's challenging me to step out of myself, to love more than anything I've ever experienced, and to become like Christ. You would know when you're home, whenever it's like you hear that word directly from heaven.
I like that you said that you get that inner witness, because I definitely can identify with that. Like you said, this kind of feels like home. And, honestly, Ted kind of made a comment of the last time we were on, and she was saying, sometimes in the church, the pastor has become the pastor because it was his grandfather's church, and it'll go on and on. And I feel like sometimes we'll stay around the church because that's the church that our grandmother took us to. But sometimes you can outgrow a ministry. What y'all think about that? What you think about that, Onyx? We can't hear you.
I apologize. I can also say that, yes, you can definitely outgrow a ministry just like you outgrow people. It's the same concept. Now, the one thing that I can say that Dr. Atkins said that I totally agree with what he just said was the simple fact that NFL is completely different from the church. Okay. Yes, we do hold the church to a higher standard, because if we have nothing else, if we have no one else in our life, and we should be able to go to the church, if the pastors or whatever should be called by God, so they say, if they should be called by God, then we should be able to be safe in that safe zone. But definitely when you feel that you feel like you can no longer attach yourself to something and it doesn't feel good. See, here's the thing. Everybody keeps saying, get to know God yourself. Okay, well, let's back up for a minute, guys. Well, how do you do that? See, I have a different way of teaching my kids, because the thing is, I want them to get to know God. So how am I going to sit there and tell them, well, you get to know God? Let me tell you something. Back in the olden days, see, that's the problem. Back in the olden days, the old school, they would say, because I said so. See, this generation here, you don't sit and say, because I said so, because they want to know why. So if we want to teach them how to have a relationship with God, well, how about having that conversation instead of saying, get to know God for yourself? How? You actually have individuals that really, really want to know. Yes, you do have carnal people. You sure do. Everybody is not working in the spiritual realm. But you do have carnal people, and they want to know, how do I become more spiritual? That's why I said at the end of the day, it still boils down to effective communication. And we got to go back to the fruit. Like, do we truly have patience? Are we really, really willing to have these conversations? So when something is not working, because it feels good. What feels good? Because my kids, they come to me and say, well, I don't think, I'm not sure if this is the right fit. Just like Elder James said, you know what I tell individuals? Well, how did it make you feel? What did you feel? Because some people don't know what discernment is. Are y'all following me on this?
Right.
They don't know this. So sometimes we got to be so basic. But we have to remember, guess what? We have to learn too. And we have to take it to a higher level. And that's why I'm saying we have to take this very serious. Life coaching, that's a serious thing. Pastors, everything, that's a serious thing, because we do have individuals coming and wanting to know, like, I want to go back to one-on-one. Like, we got to get to the basic one-on-one. So if it's not working, yes, definitely, if something doesn't feel right to you, then it is. Sometimes we outgrow things. And that's in life in general. We outgrow. So then we just move on to find something that feels good to us.
Right. That's a very good answer, and I like how Elder James said too. And both of y'all are basically saying when it doesn't feel right, and that's why I was just saying some of us may feel like our churches are not challenging us because we've been going to that church since we were little kids, and some people are just bored with church. Like, that's not my experience, but I hear people say, I'm bored with church. I go to church, they do A, B, C, and D, and I do agree with y'all that I feel like pastors and leaders should be held in the high regard, but that still doesn't mean I'm gonna put all my faith and trust in you. Because I've done that before to a person in leadership. I put my faith and trust thinking that, oh, you do wonderful things. I see you doing A, B, C, and D. You're thoughtful. But at the end of the day, I was also disappointed by that person. And it just opened me up to reality to remind me that people are not perfect. So the message that I'm saying from the people versus the church is, number one, the church is not perfect. The church is not perfect. And then number two, we go to church because this is what God told us to do. God said, don't forsake the assembly. So it's not that no one is punishing you and saying, hey, you're going to go to hell if you don't go to church, but just try getting some understanding. And why did he say that? You said, like, how can I get closer to God? Well, for one, like, you read the word and you see what he say, don't forsake the assembly. He tells you why. Because the people in the church, they edify each other. So first of all, understanding that. So if you feel like you're not getting that at your church, chances are you could be in the wrong church. You could be in the wrong environment, just like it could be with your family. Sometimes you're not growing in life because you're in the wrong environment. It's the same principles is basically what it is. Because I do believe that we all should be growing. And Tan looks like, I'm going to give Tan the floor because it seems like she wants to say something. I don't want to just keep talking. Go ahead, Tan. You had something to say?
Well, I want to make 2 points as it relates to the NFL and church. I want people to have a different way of thinking. The Bible even tells us to whom much is given, much is required. So it didn't say whether it was the pastor, it didn't say to whom what pastor much is given, much is required. The scripture just says to whom much is given, much is required. So there are various levels of requirement based on your measure. So, and I just don't want people to get stuck in saying, this is why I don't go to the church. I just want them to have a 360 look at the entire situation and then make an intelligent, informed decision. On the other point about getting to know God for yourself, that is in this point, because we all have to be taught. We have to be taught how to use the restroom, how to read, how to drive, everything. So there is a learning experience. However, back to something that Elder Wilson said when he first came in about that spiritual connection. Example, I was at a church one time and the pastor said, piercing for men was wrong. And my son was 13 and he said, excuse me, can I get an earring in my ear? And I was like, oh no, But then God began to deal with me. And he said, where can you go to the Bible and validate that it's wrong? He don't ask for anything. What harm will it be if he get that earring? That's where that part about knowing God for yourself come in. And one way to do that is to spend time with God. I'm an advocate for praise and worship. So if you're out there and you don't know where to begin, I would encourage you to begin to listen to praise and worship, because it's going to make that connection with you. And then you're going to be able to hear and know God for yourself. So even though the pastor, based on his position, wasn't for it, after God dealt with me about it, I went to my son, hey, you can get that earring, but the school better not call me and let me know you got the earring, because you got guidelines you got to go by. So
Right.
he was like, okay. So I put that in place. He was 13, got the earring. He didn't know how to take care of it. So the piercing closed. He came back at 16. Can I get an earring? Absolutely. Same rules apply, and you got to pay for it this time. All of that came because I had an intimate relationship with God. I had to know him for myself. I came from an old school holiness church where you could makeup that I got on, you couldn't wear that. Couldn't wear pants. You couldn't do that. But once I began to know God for myself, I began to grow myself. And so about talking about how
But you had that conversation with him. You see what I'm saying? But you had that. Yes, you are correct. We have to know God ourselves, just like I teach my kids. But it started from a conversation. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. And I'm not saying your point. And
right.
I value
That's
your
what
point.
I'm saying.
It's credible. I'm in total agreement with what you're saying. I'm just giving another angle to look at how you can get to know God for yourself and the value in knowing God. So instead of, I'm going to take a little step further. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, how do I know I'm at the right?
It comes from a conversation, though. It still comes back from a conversation.
I agree. Onyx, I agree. I'm in agreement with you. You got to have that conversation. I totally agree. But instead of asking yourself, how do you know you're at the right church? You should be asking yourself, how do you know you're in the right relationship with God? Because you should be growing independently for yourself first, and then go back and do that assessment on the church. I know some churches that has been the same family members, church been in existence for over 100 years, and it's the same family that's there. And I believe God is a God of increase. So if you can't see no growth, that may be a red flag for you. That's just my personal opinion. And again, It's not to bash a church, not to bash anyone or anybody's opinion. I'm just sharing, my opinion. So I first want to ask myself, Tan, are you in the right relationship with God? Girl, are you growing? Can you measure your growth? And then I'm going to begin to look at the church that I am in. And I'm not a church hopper, but I have had to move because there was no growth. There was no development, and that's how I knew I wasn't in the right place. It wasn't because what the pastor was saying. I didn't leave when the pastor said about the earring and God gave me my revelation. It was when it was time for me to, go because of my relationship with God. I knew it was time to go. And I didn't leave bashing the church. You know, I still
We
love that.
just moved around.
Yes.
Let me, because we getting pressed for time a little bit,
Okay.
and I still want to give Elder James some time to talk. So,
Mhm.
Elder James, you've been in church for a while. Talk to us about some of the benefits that you personally received in your life from just being consistently in a church home. Talk to us about some of the things you've experienced. Because for those that may say, I don't need to go to church. I love God. I can sit at home and read my Bible. I can raise my hands and pray to God. What are some of the benefits that you've experienced just by being connected in the church?
Amen. Well, you see, it's like if God wanted you to be by yourself, right? God would have just created you and nobody else in the world. If we were meant to solely just be alone or isolated, then why would there be 7 billion people on the same one planet? Or over 7 billion people, and see, here's the thing, everybody is spiritual. Everybody is a spirit, and that possesses a soul that is just housed in this, temporary earthly, body, you know what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
I would say this, God, just the same way he created our bodies, they all have different functions. My ear doesn't do what the foot does. My foot can't do what my hand does. You know, everybody in the body of Christ has a unique purpose. Everybody is valuable, and I think what I see a lot happening is, we tend to put a lot of weight, on the pastors, the leaders in the ministry, when everybody has been given a ministry. Everybody has been given a ministry of reconciliation. Christ has commissioned every believer, every disciple to preach the gospel. So that's a responsibility that we all share.
Mm-hmm.
And the church is so important because yes, you can sit at home and you can read your Bible, and I actually encourage that because like you both said, it starts with that conversation. You have to conversate with God. You have to connect. The word teaches us that the word of God is spiritual. It's truth and spirit. So whenever you're reading the word or speaking the word, you are already engaged in the spiritual realm. I think we get a little too superstitious, when it comes to the spiritual. When the scriptures teach us that Christ is our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And the church is so important because we don't understand it all. We came into the world needing to be taught, needing to learn, needing to grow, needing to mature. We had to grow into that adult form that we became. And the church is no different. The church, the body of Christ, has to grow. We can't get tripped up on these offenses because a person in position of leadership, per se, steps into his flesh and misses the mark.
Mm-hmm.
That does happen, and yes, it hurts. I'm not justifying anything. Yes, that hurts, and yes, that's wrong. I know Dewan isn't here, but Dr. Atkins said earlier how some pastors are pimping the church, or pimping Jesus, is how he said it, and it's true. It's the sad truth that this does happen in ministry. However, where is your forgiveness? That may just be the thing that God ordained to happen in a person's life, where you can now show forth Christ, and you can now, through that situation, build up treasures in heaven.
You know what, James? You know what my thought on that is, we're not gonna sit here and act like every pastor in the pulpit is right, because they not.
Right.
And some of them not. But I think we have to take ourselves out of that place of judgment. Because guess what? If I pay my tithes to you and you turn around and go buy a prostitute, that's between you and the Lord. Because I paid my tithes because that's what I believe God wanted me to do in my heart. So I think sometimes we have to, again, that remember that, yes, these are men of the cloth or men of the whatever you want to call them, but
women,
understanding that they're not perfect, and sometimes you just have to move on. It's not always easy to forgive people. We know that we have to do it, but if you're at that church and you feel like this pastor, this church, this community hurt me, there's a possibility that you just need to move on. and not just say, well, I'm never going, and I don't want to make light of what people have went through, because some people have went through some severe church hurt, severe. People don't think I go to church and my child gonna get fondled with, like Dr. Atkins was saying, but just understanding that that was just that one church, and all churches are not like that. And I understand how that feels though, because in your mind you thinking this is the church. So I think too we have to cut some people some slack a little bit, because they don't know how to heal from that sometimes, if I can say it that way. So maybe providing some type of resources, or just maybe, extending our hand to say, hey, you've been hurt at this church. Let me redirect you back to God who can heal you, and giving them a minute to move on. Because I did want to just talk about that. I don't just want to make it seem like it's just the people, because sometimes it is the church, and I do want to be able to highlight that a little bit on the show. I know we're going to have a part 4. We'll have to see where it goes. But I want to say that to anybody that's in the church, if that's you and you're in the church and you are mistreating God's people, or if you are a pastor in a place of leadership, God is going to hold you accountable for how you treat his people, because God loves people regardless of what we think about them, regardless of whatever box or judgment seat or hell we try to put them in. God still loves people. And so just understanding your role as a church member is not to judge and bash people who come into church, because we already know that they come to church and ain't nobody perfect, and you not either. So just hoping that some of that will help you to understand how to maneuver through that. If you've been hurt at that church, just know all churches are not like that. All pastors are not like that. And you may need to go back to God and say, God, you said to not forsake the assembly amongst each other. So where can I go that is a place of integrity, that is a pastor that is after your heart, that I'm not looking for him to be perfect, but that will treat me right, that'll get up here and lead according to your word. So that's for anybody that feel like, that they have been in that space where, hey, people hurt me at the church and I don't want to look at them. And also what Tan's saying, you've got hurt at work, but that necessity for having to work and pay your bills keeps you going back to work. So see the church as a place of necessity, because there are a lot of healings and deliverances that take place in the house of the Lord. And sometimes your healing is right there, but the offense won't let you get there. So I just kind of want to kind of break it down on every level. And also what Onyx is saying is have the conversation. Don't just take your children to church and expect them to get to know God that way. Talk to them, have a conversation, teach them about God. She just said have a conversation, because you don't know until somebody talks to you about something. We don't know. You can tell me something, but teach me, So that's I just kind of want to break down everybody's point. We are coming to the end of our show. Does anybody have any final thoughts? Elder James, what's your final thoughts on just the whole situation, the whole just the church situation? You can take like a minute and just maybe tell us just your final thoughts about the people versus the church. Any final words that you want to share?
Yeah, of course. My final thoughts would be, it all comes down to love. Everything comes down to love, and love is far beyond anything that can originate with man. God is love. And so we fail in life because, and this is for pastors, leaders, down to those who sit in the pews, down to the stranger who comes to visit, and those who are at home. We fail in life because we're failing in love. Love is connected to everything, every aspect of our life. And, only God can fill that void within our hearts for love. And we cannot any pain, any amount of pain to cause us to step outside of his love. We all need it, and that's from the preacher to the pews. We all need it. We all need to understand that we are in this together. And it's not necessarily that we're against one another. We all just need to recognize our need for Christ.
All right, thank you so much, Elder James. Great word. Before I let Onyx share her final thoughts, I did want to read a comment from Tawana. Shout out to Tawana, our amazing co-host. Tawana said that many people go to church and look at what's wrong instead of expecting to receive the word. So boredom is the easy way out. A positive mindset and your relationship with God is the key. So that is our amazing co-host. Thank you for chiming in to wanna there. Great perspective on that. Miss Onyx, any final words today?
Final words, I just want to say, first of all, thank you, Elder James. You summed it all up in a nutshell because I am a person of love. So that's why I understand. I'm not perfect just like everybody else, but that love thing is everything. You gotta have love. And the thing is, you gotta know what love is. You gotta know what it is, because love is it's so big in so many different capacities, but love trumps everything. So thank you for that. So look, my 2 cents didn't matter. Elder James, he said that thing. It's LOVE, love.
Yes, love is powerful. That's what the Bible said, that love covers even a multitude of sins. So, even if your pastor they're cutting up, understand and getting back to and when we do the show on love, y'all get ready for that, because some of y'all don't even begin to think you want to know what love is. You think you know what love is, but love is so much bigger than we perceive it when we say I love you with the feels. That's a whole nother show. Coach, any final words?
Yes, I just want to thank Elder Wilson for being here. He is an example of an elder in the church. There are men and women of God who are touching and reaching people, but you won't know that until you go to church. So you got to go. And I just love, like what Onyx said, having the conversation. That's why this show says it's time to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's so critical. And then out of that conversation should come effective communication. So if you got all with the church, go resolve that thing and deal with it, resolve it, reconcile it, and whatever. And I just want to encourage you to know that oftentimes reconciliation doesn't always mean you come back together. It just means that you reconcile that issue, and now you're able to move on to the next church and not only be a part of the pew, but you're going to be a part of the ministry. You've lived that thing. The church needs people, So I just encourage you to find you. My mom always find you a good church home. Find you a good church home. There's no place like a good church home. And that's my 2 cents.
Right. And just to add before we close, one way to know also that you're in a good church home, just to make sure that they're teaching from the word. There's a trend going on now. A lot of people are teaching from their perspectives and their opinions. But to be in a good Bible-based church where they can say, turn to John 3:16. Now, point the finger right there. For God so loved the world. And making sure that God, when God say things, he backs it up in his word. So you don't sit up and just let any pastor, any leader, teacher, whoever, just tell you anything, especially when it comes to God. And that's why we were saying, it's important to get to know God for yourself. And you can start just by reading your Bible. You don't own a Bible, you can get the Bible app and read for yourself, because a lot of these ways that some of these churches or pastors act are not of God. And I don't want you to get it twisted thinking, well, why would God let me go to the church? Well, sometimes people act a fool, and that's why that love have to kick in. But it has been an amazing show. We're going to save the encouragement just for the sake of time. We've enjoyed talking about this conversation, the people versus the church. The bottom line is, ask God, what church should you be in? Because he the one said, don't forsake the assembly. And so ask him to lead you to a good church. And don't be so offended when you get there and you find that church. toughen up a little bit and get out your feelings a little bit, because you ain't finna go in here and find no perfect patties and no perfect paws. That ain't how it works, okay? So get yourself together. If the usher step on your foot, don't be like, she ain't even say excuse me, because you're gonna get out your place. You see what I'm saying? Because that's what offense does. It also gets you out of your place. So toughen up a little bit and say, you know what? I ain't gonna tell her nothing. She done stepped on my shoes and be Claude Hopper. I'm gonna let her make it today. You know? We gotta y'all know I'm silly. But you gotta learn how to show some grace a little bit, because you want grace too. When you go to work and you do something wrong, you don't want your boss to fire you. You want grace. So show some grace a little bit. And if it becomes too much of a problem, then you deal with it and say, sister, let me holler at you for a minute. No, you ain't doing this on purpose, but you done stepped on my foot. So sometimes people just don't know. You done stepped on my foot. Sometimes now you look nice. I love your shoes, but my toes don't. You know, and that's all you got to do sometimes is just come on, y'all know what I'm saying, but just come on out and just don't let people so easily get you out of your place. When you pray to ask God for that church and he done sent you there, now set your butt down and go find what you're supposed to do in the church and chill out, all right? So that's all I have to say about that today. Amazing show. Thanks again to Elder James for our special guest. Shout out to Girl Onyx for joining us again today. And shout out to the co-host 10. We are here every Sunday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time with Coffee, Tea, and Christian Culture. You never know what the conversation is going to be next, so you just have to tune in and be sure to share with somebody. Anything before we go, Hope?
Well, no. And just remember, Tanisha will give you the email address. Maybe there's a topic you want to have a conversation about. We would love to hear from you. And just remember to like, shag, and tag. And if you're part of Team Replay, hashtag Team Replay, so we'll know that we got the replay team in effect too. And I just want to again shout out to Elder Wilson. Look, if you're in the Houston area, I'm not here to promote a church, but you may want to connect, because it seemed like there is love resonating.
Right.
Spirit of life. So
Spirit of life. Well, with that being said, we're gonna chuck y'all a deuce and let y'all go enjoy the rest of your beautiful day. Catch us on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and our email is coffee tea and AND culture. So coffee tea and culture at gmail.com. If you would like to be a guest on the show, maybe you got something to say. Maybe the Lord done put it on your heart. But now you're going to tell me first, and then I'm going to ask the Lord if he put that on your heart. Okay?
And then I'm accepting it. So if you don't come here with that.
Because some of y'all be like, the Lord told me that. If he told you, he going to tell me too. So he going to tell me. Well, thanks again to all of our amazing audience. Thank y'all for chiming in. I'm Tanisha R. Atkins. That's my girl Tan. That's Onyx. That's James. And we deuces. We out.
Deuce.